And when the President Obama talks about, we're getting a handle on this crisis and we're going to make sure we don't even repeat it again, the crisis hasn't even really started yet, because the real crisis begins when all these bailouts turn out to be that they don't work. Even today, the banks reported that we need another round of bailouts because all the bailouts so far didn't work. All the bank stocks were down again. And at the other side of this is going to be a tsunami of inflation, and that's the crisis. That's the crisis. Keiser, this is just a warm-up.
Well, I mean, absolutely. You're right about that. Look, the establishment isn't stupid. You talk about this imperial hubris, the bankers engaging in all this looting and corruption. They know. That's why they're militarizing police. That's why they're saying we're going to use 20,000 armed troops on the streets of America. That's why the Army War College says they're getting ready to engage the people. But that's even more crazy. The bankers think they can just like Argentina, like you said, talk more about that, totally destroy everything financially, and then just use militarized police to suppress us. I mean, this is hellish, but I guess they don't care. Everything's ruined as long as they're the top dogs sitting on top of the pile of shit, for lack of a better term. So break that down along the lines of the engineered collapse of Argentina and where you see this going here.
Yeah, the Argentina example is fantastic, and as I said before, it's called Argentina Collapse. The 12-part YouTube series so it's about 120 minutes or so. It's a document film, and it lays out the timeline. So what's remarkable about that film is you can pretty well figure out where America is on the timeline. And right now, America seems to be on around the 2000-2001 period, when the banks and the politicians and the legal system basically just pulls up the drawbridge and says you're on your own. And the people are on the street banging pots. They close the banks. They close access to the banks, and they're just starving in the streets. And the guys are in the castle. They pulled up the drawbridge, and they're partying. And that's kind of like the timeline we're on. And who was orchestrating the Argentina nightmare? Oh, it's the IMF. Who's in charge of bailing out the world now? Oh, it's the IMF. It's the same group of people. They're going to do these same austerity measures on the U.S. They're treating America like the Citibank treated Latin America in the 1980s. Who do they think they are?
But more than that, I want you to speak to this, Max. They're going to raise the drawbridge up, let us rot for 6 months to a year to teach us, and then they'll let a little bit of loans back in, and they'll pose as the savior, doling out more fiat currency backed by taxpayers, and the middle class is going to be gone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they'll dole it out. Again, interest rates are the fulcrum upon which all these things are balanced. So if you're a friend of the people on the other side of that drawbridge, you get a low rate, like, for example, the hedge fund community right now. Geithner said to the hedge fund community, we want you to buy some of our toxic debts. And to do it, we're going to lend you money at virtually zero interest rate. And if it doesn't work out, you don't lose money, we're going to bail you out again. Gee, that's a nice deal. Where do I get that deal? You're going to lend me money at 0% interest to buy what you call as a toxic debt. If I lose any money, you're going to make me whole again. That's the deal the government's offering the hedge fund community. Well, that's like me going into Las Vegas and pulling the slot machine, and anytime it doesn't come up a winner, the casino pays out triple.
What would you say to the police and military listening? I mean, they really have the same interest to the American people. They're all having their future destroyed as well. Comment on that. And then secondarily, what about having state grand juries, federal grand juries, go after more of these Madoffs, more of these bankers that have committed all these crimes, and start bringing these arrogant bastards to justice? Then we can, get rid of their system and bring back liberty and freedom and transparency and the rule of law. I mean, it's either us or them. If we keep letting them grandstand as the saviors for the crisis they created, there's no end in sight.
Well, the police and the military, they're in a horrible position because, first of all, as a society, we need police, we need military. And so they are just stuck in a horrible position. If you use the Argentina timeline, what happens is eventually at the end, they side with the people. Remember in the Chavez coup, that was proven to be a plot of the U.S. The military eventually sided with the people. So they're the last ones to flip, unfortunately, because they're in the worst position. but eventually they do flip. But by then the situation is quite bad. Now, how do you go after these people? You know, if you go back to the 1980s with Michael Milken and Drexel Burnham Lambert, which was at that time the biggest fraud in Wall Street history. Ultimately, I think it was Rudy Giuliani, who was a prosecutor at the time in New York. They had to go and they had to use RICO, anti-racketeering. And that's the only way you're going to get at these guys, because the rating agencies like Moody's and S&P, who gave these bonds AAA rating fraudulently, the investment banks that recommended them, and everyone involved in this racket, in this conspiracy, has to be prosecuted simultaneously under RICO. Because if you go after one at a time, then they just move the game to a new venue, they move the game to a new security, now it's a new credit default swap, now it's a synthetic credit default swap, now it's an inverted yield credit default, out of the money put spread. They just keep making up new securities as they go along, and it's impossible to track them down. So what Giuliani figured out was RICO. We're going to go after them as a racket, and they took down Drexel, they took down Ivan Boesky, and they took down Michael Milken. To take down Geithner and these guys, they've got to go after them using RICO.
But now it's 1,000 times worse. Now they premeditatedly thought about this. They're leveraging it to the global level, and they're saying we're going to set up a new bank of the world that you pay your taxes to. I mean, I guess they've got to go for broke, because if they don't go for broke and get the power, get the tyranny, I mean, what I'm saying is they've got to have the tyranny in place just to protect themselves from all their previous crimes.
Again, the Argentina timeline and methodology, it's a great film. If you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it recently, check it out. Again, the way that basically what happens is the legal system, the judges and the judiciary, it gets into play, and the highest courts in the land start to rewrite laws. And I would imagine that as the banking crisis gets worse and worse, we're going to see some new laws which are going to be sweeping.